War is hell. It is, perhaps, humanity's greatest failure. A relentless, repeating tragedy that consumes lives, shatters civilizations, and stains our history in blood. We build monuments to peace, yet we build far more monuments to our warriors. We teach our children that violence is never the answer, yet our entire social structure, our very nations, our laws, our technology, seems to have been forged in the fires of conflict. This is the great, uncomfortable, and deeply shocking paradox of our existence. What if this horrifying force, this engine of destruction, had an accidental, dark, and profoundly creative side effect? What if war, in all its horror, is what built civilization as we know it? This is not a justification. It is not an apology for violence. It is an honest, unflinching look at the most controversial theory of our social evolution. The idea that without war, we might still be living in small, scattered, and far more violent tribal societies. To understand this dark bargain, we must first travel back. Back before kings, before empires, before cities, to the so-called state of nature. Philosophers have long debated this ancient past. Was it a peaceful garden, as Rousseau imagined, where noble savages lived in harmony? Or was it, as Hobbes bleakly stated, a state of war of all against all, where life was nasty, brutish, and short? For decades, the Romantic view held sway. But in the 20th century, archaeology and anthropology began to tell a different, more brutal story. Studies of pre-state societies from the highlands of Papua New Guinea to the Amazon basin revealed a shocking truth. The per capita rates of violent death in many tribal societies were astronomical. They weren't fighting massive pitched battles, but they were engaged in constant, low-level cycles of raids, feuds, and revenge killings. One study suggested that as many as 25 to 30% of all men in some of these societies died from violence. Compare that to the 20th century. Even with 2 world wars with genocides and atomic bombs, the global average of violent death was closer to 1 or 2%. The peaceful savage was a myth. Humanity was trapped in a cycle of continuous, small-scale violence. The problem wasn't that we were at war. The problem was that we couldn't create peace. There was no central authority to stop the killing, no police force, no Supreme Court. If your cousin was killed, it was your duty to seek revenge, perpetuating the cycle forever. We are diving deep into the uncomfortable truths of our own history. If you appreciate this kind of in-depth, challenging content, take a second to hit the subscribe button and the notification bell. You won't want to miss where this argument goes. So, how did we escape this bloody trap? The answer is as terrible as it is simple. Someone won. Imagine a landscape of small, warring tribes. Now, imagine a warlord, a stationary bandit, as economist Mancur Olson called him. This warlord, through luck or skill or brutality, conquers his neighbors. At first, he acts like a roving bandit. He plunders, he takes resources, he leaves. But soon he realizes something. It is far more profitable to stay, to rule, to tax the population he has conquered, promising them one simple thing in return. I will protect you from everyone else, and I will protect you from me. To do this, the stationary bandit must do something revolutionary. He must create a monopoly on violence. He declares, "No one else is allowed to kill. No more feuds. No more tribal raids. All violence is now my business. I, and my armed followers, are the only ones who get to use force. This is the birth of the state. It is not a social contract. It is a protection racket. But it works. By violently suppressing internal conflict, the warlord, now calling himself a king, accidentally creates a larger zone of peace. People are caged within this new state. They are no longer free to leave, but they are also no longer free to murder their neighbors. For the first time, A centralized authority exists to enforce laws, punish crimes, and stop the endless cycles of revenge. And no civilization demonstrates this brutal process more clearly than Rome. The Roman Republic was not born in a peaceful desire for democracy. It was forged in centuries of non-stop, desperate, existential warfare. Rome began as just one small, aggressive city-state on the Italian peninsula, surrounded by dozens of others, Etruscans, Samnites, Gauls, all trying to annihilate each other. Rome's sheer survival depended on its ability to become a relentlessly efficient war machine. It had to organize, it had to tax, it had to conscript, and it had to win, or it would be extinguished. This intense, centuries-long competition acted like a furnace. It burned away inefficiency. It forced the Romans to develop a political system, the Republic, that was ruthlessly effective at mobilizing resources for war. By the time they had conquered all of Italy, they had done what was previously impossible. They had suppressed centuries of local tribal warfare, uniting the peninsula into a single political unit. They had replaced chaos with order. Their order. But the machine, once built, needed to be fed. The engine of Roman conquest didn't stop, and as it expanded, it faced new problems. How do you move an army of 50,000 men from Italy to Gaul, quickly, before a rebellion gets out of hand? You build the Roman roads. Those famous, impossibly straight roads that still exist today were not built for tourism. They were not built for commerce. They were built for one reason: to move legions faster. They were arteries for military power. The phrase, "all roads lead to Rome," was literally true, because Rome needed to project its force to the furthest corners of its conquered territory. And yet, this purely military infrastructure had a massive, unintentional side effect. It became the single greatest catalyst for trade, communication, and cultural exchange the world had ever seen. The military roads built the civilian economy. But the problems didn't stop there. Now you've conquered Spain and Greece and Egypt. You have dozens of different cultures, with hundreds of different local laws and customs. How do you manage this? How do you collect taxes, settle disputes over property, and stop the entire fragile system from collapsing into internal chaos? You create Roman law. The Romans were forced to develop a sophisticated, standardized legal system, a code that applied to citizens and non-citizens alike, purely as an instrument of control. It was designed to efficiently manage their vast, multi-ethnic empire, an empire held together only by the threat of military force. And yet, that system of law, born from the practical needs of a military dictatorship, became the bedrock of Western civilization. The very concepts of justice, contracts, and property that we hold today are its direct descendants. The roads built for armies created trade. The laws written to control conquered peoples created justice. This pattern repeats again and again. The intense pressure of survival of the fittest between states forces them to innovate or die. The need to build better cannons in the Middle Ages drove the science of metallurgy and physics. The need to aim those cannons drove advances in mathematics. The need to fund larger armies forced kings to create complex tax bureaucracies and financial markets. In the 20th century, the existential terror of the Cold War, a conflict that defined generations, drove the most rapid technological leap in human history. We reached the moon, we split the atom, and we created the internet. ARPANET, the precursor to the web you are using right now, was a military project designed to create a decentralized communication network that could survive a nuclear war. We are, right now, speaking to each other across a civilian network that was born from the logic of mutual assured destruction. This is the uncomfortable, shocking paradox. War is the engine of our creativity. It is the brutal catalyst that forced us, kicking and screaming, out of tribal chaos and into organized, complex societies. It forced us to cooperate by giving us a terrifying other to unite against. It built the state. It built the infrastructure. It built the law. And this leads to our final modern paradox. Many historians, like Steven Pinker, argue that we are living in the long peace, the most peaceful era in human history. The chance of a person today dying in war is lower than at almost any other time. Why? Because the very process we've described of war building bigger and bigger states has reached its logical conclusion. We have created states so large and weapons so powerful, nuclear weapons, that total war between great powers is no longer war. It is collective suicide. The peace we enjoy today is a peace guaranteed by the very threat of total annihilation, a threat delivered by the technology that war itself created. We used war to build civilization. The question now is, can civilization finally find a way to end war? Or is the brutal engine that built our world simply waiting to be turned on again? But what do you think? Is this paradox, war-building civilization, a closed chapter of our past? Or is it an active, dangerous part of our human nature that we can never truly escape? Tell us your theory in the comments below. Civilization is paid for with conflict. Preserving peace makes it worthwhile.